My name is Amanda, and at 32 I thought I had everything figured out. A successful career as a financial director, a loving husband, and a promising future with a $650,000 relocation bonus to start our new life in San Francisco. Then my phone rang. The gleeful laughter of my mother-in-law Eleanor filled my ear. "I used your money to buy Stephanie a beach house. You don't deserve it." My calm, "Thanks for letting me know," masked the storm brewing inside me. Little did she know her victory laugh would soon turn to silence. If you're watching this, I'd love to know where you're viewing from. Drop a comment below, hit that like button, and subscribe to hear more stories about family betrayal and how I fought back. Trust me, you'll want to see how this ends. I'd worked my way up at one of New York's top financial firms for nearly a decade. Starting as an analyst straight out of college, I put in 60-hour weeks, sacrificed weekends, and navigated the cutthroat environment of high finance. Every promotion felt earned through blood, sweat, and tears. By 30, I'd reached financial director, managing portfolios worth billions, and leading a team of 12 analysts. My reputation was built on meticulous attention to detail and an almost supernatural ability with numbers. One decimal point in the wrong place could mean millions lost, so precision wasn't just valued, it was essential. My life changed at a financial technology conference in Manhattan. While waiting for a panel discussion on blockchain applications in banking, I noticed Brian Thompson, a software engineer, with intelligent eyes and an easy smile. He asked thoughtful questions during the presentation, and afterward we found ourselves discussing the intersection of finance and technology over coffee. Unlike the aggressive finance types I usually met, Brian listened more than he spoke and seemed genuinely interested in my perspectives, rather than trying to impress me with his knowledge. Our first date was at a small Italian restaurant in the village. Brian arrived with a single yellow tulip, not a predictable rose, and told me it symbolized cheerful thoughts. We talked until the restaurant closed, discovering shared values about work ethic, family, and dreams for the future. 3 more dates followed that week, each ending with longer conversations and stronger connections. Within 2 months, we were practically inseparable. Meeting Brian's family should have been my first warning. Eleanor Thompson welcomed me with a warm hug and homemade apple pie, telling Brian, in 7, "She's even prettier than you described." Stephanie, Brian's older sister, offered a cool handshake and assessing glance. Throughout dinner, Eleanor asked about my career, nodding approvingly at my accomplishments, though I noticed subtle comments like, "It must be difficult managing such large sums when you're still building experience." At the time, I thought she was making conversation. I didn't recognize the seeds of doubt she was planting. Our wedding day arrived after a year of dating. Eleanor had opinions about everything. The venue wasn't prestigious enough, the guest list too small, the menu too experimental. When my parents contributed less financially than she expected, they were public school teachers with modest savings. Eleanor made sure everyone knew she was helping out substantially. She insisted on inviting business associates my husband-to-be barely knew while questioning why my college roommate needed to attend. Brian dismissed my concerns, saying Mom just wants everything perfect for us. The first 2 years of marriage revealed Eleanor's true colors. Christmas gifts for Stephanie included luxury vacations and designer jewelry, while I received kitchen appliances and gift cards. Eleanor called Brian weekly with financial emergencies: a leaking roof, property taxes, medical bills. Each time Brian transferred money without question. When I suggested creating a budget for family assistance, Brian accused me of being stingy. "She raised me alone after Dad died," he'd say. "I owe her everything." I backed down, not wanting to drive a wedge between them, though I noticed Eleanor never seemed to have money problems when Stephanie needed something. Our lives took a dramatic turn when Brian received a job offer from a leading tech company in San Francisco. The position as senior software architect represented a 40% salary increase and career advancement he couldn't refuse. We discussed it extensively. The opportunity was incredible, but it meant uprooting my established career. "I can't ask you to sacrifice everything," Brian said, genuinely concerned about my professional future. I appreciated his consideration, but worried about starting over in a new city. 2 weeks later, I received unexpected news from my own company. Kate, my supervisor, called me into her office. "Amanda, we value your contributions and don't want to lose you," she said, sliding a folder across her desk. "We're offering you a transfer to our San Francisco office with your current position and a substantial relocation package." I opened the folder to find details of a $650,000 relocation bonus, enough to cover moving expenses and make a significant down payment on a house in the expensive Bay Area market. The paperwork outlined conditions I needed to stay with the company for at least 3 years, and the money was specifically designated for relocation expenses and housing. When we told Eleanor about our plans, her congratulations seemed forced. "That's wonderful, darling," she told Brian, while barely acknowledging me. Later, she pulled Brian aside, and I overheard her saying, "You should be the one managing that money, not Amanda. It's too much responsibility for her." That evening, she peppered me with questions about how and when the company would release the funds, what account they would go to, and whether there were any loopholes in the contract. I answered politely, but felt increasingly uncomfortable with her interest. House hunting in San Francisco proved challenging even with our substantial budget. We spent weekends flying back and forth, touring properties and comparing neighborhoods. After nearly 2 months, we found a beautiful craftsman-style home in Noe Valley with views of the city, walking distance to parks, and enough space for a home office. We put down a deposit of $20,000, with the understanding that the full down payment would come from my relocation package once finalized. As moving day approached, the logistics became overwhelming. Between wrapping up projects at work, packing our apartment, and coordinating with movers, I barely had time to breathe. Eleanor called, offering help. "You have so much on your plate, dear. Let me handle some of the paperwork." I managed all the administrative details when we moved the family from Chicago, years ago. Brian immediately supported the idea. "Mom's really good at organizing these things and you're swamped with work." Against my better judgment and the nagging feeling in my stomach, I agreed to let Eleanor help with some of the relocation documentation, giving her the contact information for our real estate agent and moving company. 3 days before our scheduled move, my phone rang during a meeting. Seeing our real estate agent's name, I excused myself to answer. "Amanda, I need to discuss the down payment," Mark said, his voice tense. "The sellers are expecting funds to be transferred within 24 hours per the agreement." My stomach dropped. The money should be coming from my company's relocation package. "Wasn't that communicated?" Mark paused. "We haven't received confirmation of the transfer." "If the money doesn't arrive by tomorrow, they're legally entitled to keep your deposit and put the house back on the market." I immediately called our company's finance department, trying to maintain composure while panic built inside me. "The relocation funds were dispersed 3 days ago," explained Diane from payroll. "$650,000 transferred to your joint account ending in 4872. She confirmed all paperwork was properly processed and the transaction had cleared. "Is there a problem with the funds?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. "I'm looking into it," I replied, my mind racing. My next call was to our bank. After verifying my identity, the representative delivered shocking news. "Mrs. Thompson, the funds were received, but the entire amount was withdrawn the following day." My heart pounded as I asked who made the withdrawal. "I'm afraid I can't disclose that information over the phone, but I can confirm it was done with proper authorization." When I pressed further, he suggested I visit a branch in person with identification. "This is a substantial sum, and we need to ensure proper protocols are followed." When Brian came home that evening, I confronted him immediately. "The relocation money is gone. $650,000 withdrawn the day after it was deposited." His face registered genuine shock, but when I mentioned my suspicions about his mother, his expression hardened. "Are you seriously accusing my mother of stealing?" he demanded. "She was helping with paperwork, Brian. She asked about the account details and timing. It can't be a coincidence." The argument escalated quickly, with Brian defending Eleanor vehemently. "You've always been jealous of my relationship with her," he shouted. "And frankly, if you checked our accounts more often, instead of working constantly, maybe you would have noticed sooner. I tried calling Eleanor repeatedly, but each call went straight to voicemail. My texts showed as delivered, but remained unanswered. When I pointed this out to Brian, he shrugged. She's probably busy with her charity committee. She'll call back when she can. His casual dismissal infuriated me further. Brian, we're about to lose our house, and possibly my job. This isn't a minor inconvenience. The pressure mounted from multiple directions. Mark called twice more about the down payment. Kate emailed asking for an update on my relocation timeline, mentioning that my replacement in New York was scheduled to start training the following week. I maintained a professional facade, while my personal life crumbled around me. Each night I stayed awake calculating how much savings we could scrape together, and researching short-term loans, knowing neither would come close to the missing amount. With Eleanor unreachable, I called Stephanie, hoping she might provide insight into her mother's whereabouts. She's not answering my calls either, Stephanie said, her voice oddly flat. When I explained the situation, she responded with unnatural calmness. I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation. Mother would never do something like that. Before ending the call, I mentioned the missing money directly. Stephanie, this is serious. We're talking about $650,000 that disappeared after your mother had access to our account information. There was a long pause before Stephanie abruptly said, I have to go, and hung up. That night was the first of many sleepless ones. Brian and I argued until past midnight about what to do next. We need to report this to the police, I insisted. This is theft, plain and simple. Brian paced our living room, alternating between denial and anger. We don't know it was her. And even if she did move the money, she must have had a good reason. We can't call the police on my mother. The distance between us grew with each exchange, his loyalty to Eleanor, clearly outweighing his concern for our future. The next morning, desperate for advice, I confided in Rachel, my closest colleague at work. Over coffee in the company cafeteria, I explained everything. Rachel listened without judgment, then offered practical guidance. Amanda, you need to talk to legal immediately. This isn't just about your personal finances, it involves company funds allocated for a specific purpose. If you don't report it, you could be held liable. Her words crystallized my fears. What about my marriage? I asked quietly. Rachel squeezed my hand. One crisis at a time. Protect yourself first. When I returned home that evening, Brian's attitude had shifted from defensive to accusatory. You've always made my mother feel unwelcome, he said, as soon as I walked through the door. You criticize her gifts. You roll your eyes when she calls you. Make excuses to skip family gatherings. His revisionist history stunned me. That's not true, and you know it. I've bent over backward to accommodate her for years. Brian shook his head dismissively. This is your problem to fix. You're the one who got us into this mess, with your fancy job and relocation package. As he retreated to the guest room with a pillow and blanket, I realized I was truly on my own. The next morning, my phone rang at exactly 7:30. Eleanor's name flashed on the screen. I put the call on speaker so Brian could hear my hand shaking slightly as I answered. What came through wasn't an explanation or apology, but laughter, cold, triumphant laughter that sent chills down my spine. I thought you should know, Eleanor said, her voice dripping with satisfaction. I've used your relocation money to buy Stephanie a beach house in Malibu. A little gift she actually deserves. I remained silent as she continued. You never belonged in this family, Amanda. Brian deserves someone who appreciates family values, not some career-obsessed woman who puts work before everything else. My response was measured, betraying none of the rage and heartbreak I felt. Thanks for letting me know, Eleanor. The simplicity of my reply seemed to confuse her momentarily, before I added, I appreciate your honesty. I ended the call and turned to Brian, whose face had drained of color. That can't be what it sounds like, he muttered, though the truth was undeniable. She must have been joking or confused. Even faced with direct evidence, he was making excuses. Your mother just admitted to stealing $650,000, Brian. There's nothing confusing about that. With confirmation of my suspicions, I scheduled an emergency meeting with Kate. Walking into her office, I was prepared for disappointment, anger, even termination. Instead, Kate listened attentively as I explained the situation. "I understand this puts the company in a difficult position," I concluded. "The funds were intended for relocation, and now I can't complete the move as planned." Kate's response surprised me. "Amanda, you're not the first employee to face personal challenges during relocation. What concerns me is the theft of company funds." She picked up her phone and dialed an extension. "David from legal needs to hear this. We'll figure out next steps together." That afternoon, Stephanie posted a photo on social media that made my blood boil. Standing in front of a modern beach house, with floor-to-ceiling windows, she beamed at the camera. The caption read, "Surprise gift from the most amazing mother in the world. Beach life begins now. Number, blessed number, dream home number. Thanks, Mom." I showed the post to Brian, who finally seemed to grasp the reality of the situation. "I need to call Mom," he said quietly. "This has to be a misunderstanding." But instead of confronting Eleanor about her actions, he spent the next hour in the bedroom with the door closed, his voice too low for me to hear his words. When Brian emerged, I expected contrition, or at least acknowledgement of Eleanor's wrongdoing. Instead, he turned the blame toward me. "You know this wouldn't have happened if you made more effort with my family," he said, pouring himself a generous glass of whiskey. "Mom has always felt judged by you. Your success makes her feel inadequate." I stared at him in disbelief. "Are you seriously suggesting I deserve to have $650,000 stolen from me because I didn't make your mother feel special enough?" Brian shrugged. "I'm just saying there are two sides to every story. If you spent more time with family instead of always working, maybe things would be different." The following day, I met with David from legal and two members of the finance department. The severity of the situation became clearer as David outlined potential consequences. "What we're describing is felony theft and fraud," he explained. "The company has a responsibility to report this to authorities, but we understand your personal circumstances complicate matters." He slid a document across the table. "This authorizes us to pursue recovery of the funds. You'll need to decide if you want to press criminal charges as well." The thought of seeing Eleanor arrested created conflicting emotions, not because I felt sympathy for her, but because I knew it would permanently destroy what remained of my marriage. That evening, Eleanor called again. Gone was the triumphant tone, replaced by something more sinister. "I understand you've been discussing this matter with your company," she said without preamble. "That's a mistake, Amanda. If you pursue this, I'll tell everyone Brian authorized the transfer. It will be your word against mine. And who do you think people will believe? A controlling career woman, or a devoted mother?" Before I could respond, she continued, "Stephanie deserves that beach house more than you deserve a San Francisco mansion. She's family. You're just temporary." The call ended with her final threat: "Back off, or you'll lose everything, not just the money." Brian's physical withdrawal mirrored his emotional distance. He began sleeping on the couch, leaving for work before I woke, and returning after I went to bed. The few times we occupied the same space, he avoided eye contact and responded to questions with minimal words. When I asked directly if he was considering divorce, he muttered, "I don't know what I'm considering anymore." His phone became a fortress of privacy angled away when I entered the room, conversations ending abruptly if I came near. Colleagues began noticing something was wrong. "Weren't you supposed to be in San Francisco by now?" asked Michael from marketing during a budget meeting. "Just finalizing some details," I replied, with a forced smile. Rachel covered for me when possible, rerouting questions and changing subjects, but the weight of maintaining appearances while my life collapsed became increasingly exhausting. Each night alone in bed, I cycled through anger, betrayal, grief, and fear. Emotions amplified by the isolation of having no one to fully confide in. The final blow came when I borrowed Brian's laptop to check our joint credit card statement, our desktop computer having already been packed for the move. A Facebook message notification appeared from Stephanie Moms, worried Brian isn't being careful enough with his communications. Delete your texts and use this instead. Scrolling through their conversation history, I discovered discussions about selling our current apartment, Brian's plans to temporarily move back with Eleanor, and Stephanie's suggestion that Brian consult a divorce attorney to protect family assets. The betrayal was complete, not just the theft of money, but a coordinated plan to dismantle our life together while presenting me as the villain. 5 days after Eleanor's confession, Brian finally confronted me with his decision. Standing in our half-packed living room, surrounded by boxes labeled for a move that wouldn't happen, he delivered the words that finalized our fracture. I need space to think about everything he said, not meeting my eyes. I'm going to stay with Mom for a while. The casual way he mentioned Eleanor, as if she hadn't just destroyed our future, sparked something inside me. You're choosing the woman who stole from us over your wife. Brian's jaw tightened. It's complicated. You wouldn't understand the dynamics of our family. He paused before adding the most hurtful part. Maybe you should reconsider how you've treated my family all these years. This situation didn't happen in a vacuum. The argument that followed released years of repressed frustration. I've spent our entire relationship trying to please your mother, I shouted, tears streaming down my face. I changed holiday plans, endured her criticism, accepted her backhanded compliments. What more could I possibly have done? Brian's response cut deep. My mother sacrificed everything for me after Dad died. She worked 3 jobs to put me through college. What have you sacrificed, Amanda? Your precious career always comes first. The unfairness of his accusation left me speechless. I had supported his career moves, adjusted my schedule for his family events, and never complained about the money he regularly sent Eleanor. Money we could have saved for our future. When my voice returned, I confronted him about the messages I'd found. Were you planning to divorce me all along? Was this whole San Francisco move just a convenient way to end things? Brian's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. You had no right to read my private conversations, he shouted, deflecting from the actual content. I was exploring options, that's all. Stephanie was just trying to help. When I pressed about their plans to sell our apartment, he admitted they had discussed it. We need to liquidate assets if we're separating. That's just practical. The clinical way he discussed dismantling our life together revealed how emotionally disconnected he'd already become. My phone interrupted our argument, a call from the bank. Brian fell silent as I answered, and listened to the fraud department representative explain their findings. Mrs. Thompson, our investigation shows the withdrawal was made using a power of attorney document we now believe to be falsified. The signature matching your name shows inconsistencies with your signature on file. The representative continued, We're conducting an internal investigation and will need you to come to the branch to file a formal fraud report. I thanked him and ended the call, turning to Brian. Your mother forged my signature on a power of attorney document. That's how she accessed the money. Before Brian could respond, his phone rang, Eleanor calling. He answered on speaker, perhaps hoping she would deny everything. Instead, her voice was hard and threatening. I've just heard from my attorney. If Amanda pursues this ridiculous fraud claim, I'll countersue for defamation. I have witnesses who will testify that she's been planning to leave you and take the money all along. When Brian remained silent, Eleanor added, Brian darling, you know I did this for your own good. She was going to leave you eventually. This way at least the money stays in the family. The call ended with her final blow. By the way, Brian told me he thought this was for the best. He's been unhappy for years. That evening I watched in silence as Brian packed a suitcase. Each item of clothing folded and placed inside represented another piece of our relationship being discarded. The gold watch I'd given him for our first anniversary went into his toiletry bag. The framed photo of us in Hawaii remained face down on the nightstand. When the suitcase was full, he stood awkwardly in the doorway. I'll let you know where to send the rest of my things, he said, as if we were casual roommates parting ways. No apology, no acknowledgement of the pain he was causing, no recognition of the years we'd built together. The sound of the front door closing behind him echoed through the apartment like a final heartbeat. Alone in our bedroom now, just my bedroom, the full weight of everything crashed down on me. I curled into a ball on Brian's side of the bed, inhaling the lingering scent of his cologne as sobs racked my body. The betrayal wasn't just about money. It was the realization that the man I'd built my life around had never truly been on my side. Every photo on the walls, every shared purchase, every future plan we'd discussed, all of it now tainted by the knowledge that when tested, his loyalty lay elsewhere. I cried until my throat was raw and my eyes swollen, eventually falling into exhausted sleep, still wearing my work clothes. Rachel's call at 1:15 in the morning startled me awake. "I know it's late," she said, her voice urgent, "but I needed to tell you right away. I spoke with Kate about everything." Before I could process this information, she continued, "The company's legal and security departments have been briefed. They're treating this as a serious case of fraud involving company funds." There was a pause before she delivered the news that would change everything. "Amanda, they're launching a full investigation with corporate security and a forensic accounting team. The company is standing with you on this. You're not alone." That moment in the darkness, clutching my phone and hearing that someone finally was taking action, marked a profound shift in my understanding. Brian had made his choice, but I didn't have to accept defeat. Eleanor had calculatingly manipulated the situation, believing her status as family would protect her from consequences. Stephanie had willingly participated in destroying my marriage for material gain. The clarity was both painful and liberating. These people had never been my family in any meaningful sense of the word. They had viewed me as an outsider, from the beginning someone to be tolerated until I was no longer useful. As dawn broke, I made a decision that would alter the course of everything that followed. Sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and my laptop, I began documenting every detail: dates, conversations, bank records, Eleanor's confession, Brian's complicity. The woman who had cried herself to sleep was gone. In her place sat someone new, clear-eyed, resolute, and prepared to fight. "You thought I would break," I whispered to the empty apartment. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." The following morning I met with Jennifer Collins, a litigation attorney specializing in financial fraud. Rachel had recommended her, describing Jennifer as brilliantly strategic and utterly ruthless when necessary. In her sleek downtown office, I laid out the entire situation, holding nothing back. Jennifer took meticulous notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions, her expression remaining professionally neutral, despite the increasingly outrageous details. When I finished, she removed her glasses and leaned forward. "Mrs. Thompson, what your mother-in-law has done constitutes several serious crimes: fraud, forgery, grand larceny, and possibly identity theft. The question isn't whether you have a case, you absolutely do. The question is how aggressively you want to pursue it." We discussed options for nearly 2 hours. Jennifer explained that we could pursue both criminal and civil actions simultaneously. The criminal case would be prosecuted by the district attorney, if they find sufficient evidence, which seems abundant here. The civil case would seek to recover the money, plus damages for emotional distress and any financial hardship resulting from the theft. She recommended gathering additional evidence to strengthen our position. Most states allow one-party consent for recording conversations. I suggest you record any future interactions with Eleanor, Brian, or Stephanie. Don't antagonize them, but if they contact you, let them talk. People like your mother-in-law often incriminate themselves when they think they're intimidating you. Following Jennifer's advice, I began systematically documenting everything. I downloaded bank statements showing the deposit and subsequent withdrawal. I saved Stephanie's social media posts about the beach house. When Eleanor called to repeat her threats, I recorded the conversation, maintaining a calm demeanor that provoked her into making increasingly incriminating statements. "Of course I took the money," she declared at one point. "It was the only way to protect my son from your greed." Consider it compensation for the years you've spent trying to come between us. Each recording went immediately to Jennifer, building our case with Eleanor's own words. The company moved quickly once fully informed. Kate arranged a meeting with David from Legal and Mark Wilson, the head of internal investigations, a former FBI financial crime specialist. The company takes theft of employee benefits extremely seriously, Mark explained. We've already begun tracking the money trail from your account to the beach house purchase. He spread several documents on the conference table. We've identified the real estate transaction in Malibu. The property was purchased for $695,000, with $650,000 paid in cash. The deed is in Stephanie Thompson's name, but all paperwork was handled by Eleanor. He tapped another document. We've also discovered the notary, who allegedly witnessed your signature on the power of attorney, has no record of the document. We believe the notary stamp was forged as well. While the investigation progressed, I received divorce papers from Brian. The petition cited irreconcilable differences and requested an equal division of all assets, including our apartment. Notably absent was any mention of the stolen relocation funds. I showed the papers to Jennifer, who scoffed. He's hoping you'll be too emotional to notice they've conveniently omitted the largest financial asset in question. She advised against signing anything. We'll use the discovery process during divorce proceedings to demand full financial disclosure, including information about the beach house. That will create another legal front they have to defend. Rather than allowing anger to consume me, I channeled my emotions into strategic action. I maintained professional composure at work, impressing Kate with my ability to continue performing, despite personal turmoil. I documented every communication with Brian, Eleanor, and Stephanie. I worked closely with the bank's fraud department, providing statements and signature samples to support their investigation. Throughout it all, I refused to engage in the emotional manipulation Brian attempted during his occasional texts, checking if I was being reasonable yet. A week after Brian moved out, I arranged to meet Stephanie at a coffee shop, suggesting I wanted to discuss an amicable resolution. She arrived wearing expensive sunglasses and a smug expression, clearly believing I was preparing to surrender. I appreciate you meeting me. I began, my phone recording in my purse. I'm trying to understand exactly what happened with the relocation money. Stephanie stirred her latte leisurely. It's pretty simple. Mom decided the money would be better used for family purposes. The beach house is an investment for all of us. Well, except you, obviously. Her casual cruelty was stunning. So, your mother took my company's relocation funds without permission to buy you a house, and you were okay with that? Stephanie shrugged. Mom handles family finances, always has. Brian understood it was for the best. As our conversation continued, Stephanie revealed crucial details without realizing their significance. Mom had been planning this for months, ever since you mentioned the relocation package. She knew exactly when the money would arrive, and how to access it. When I asked about Brian's involvement, she hesitated before admitting. He knew what Mom was planning. He didn't exactly approve, but he didn't stop her either. Family loyalty, you know. The most damning statement came when I asked about the house title. It's in my name only. Mom said that would make it harder for you to claim any part of it. Her final threat as she left. You'll never get that money back, Amanda. Save yourself the embarrassment and just move on. The company's investigation team worked with remarkable efficiency. Mark called with updates nearly daily. We've obtained copies of all purchase documents for the Malibu property, he reported 2 weeks into the investigation. The seller confirmed dealing primarily with Eleanor Thompson, who represented herself as acting on behalf of her daughter. We've also identified the attorney who handled the transaction, James Peterson, of Peterson and Grant. He claims he had no knowledge the funds were obtained fraudulently, but we're investigating whether he failed to perform due diligence. Brian began to realize the seriousness of the situation when Mark's team interviewed his colleagues at the tech company. His carefully constructed narrative of family loyalty began crumbling as legal and professional consequences loomed. He called late one evening, his voice lacking its recent hostility. Amanda, We need to talk about resolving this situation. When I remained silent, he continued, if you drop the investigation and fraud claims, I'm willing to offer a more generous divorce settlement. You can keep the apartment entirely. The desperation in his voice confirmed what I already knew. Eleanor's actions were indefensible, and he was finally facing that reality. I'm not interested in negotiations, Brian, I replied calmly. This isn't about the divorce anymore. It's about accountability. With Jennifer's guidance, I prepared for the legal battles ahead. We developed a comprehensive timeline of events, gathered character witnesses from my professional network, and documented the financial and emotional impact of Eleanor's actions. Most cases like this settle before trial, Jennifer explained. Once they realize the evidence against them, they typically try to negotiate terms. She smiled confidently. But if they want to go to court, we'll be more than ready. The jury will not look kindly on a mother-in-law stealing her daughter-in-law's company relocation funds to buy her other child a beach house. As preparations continued, I maintained a laser focus on the ultimate goal: justice, not revenge. When Rachel asked if I was hoping to see Eleanor in jail, I considered the question carefully. What I want is for her to face real consequences for her actions. She spent her life manipulating people and escaping responsibility. This time needs to be different. The clarity of purpose helped me navigate the complex emotions that surfaced: daily grief for my failed marriage, anger at the betrayal, fear about the future. I was no longer defined by what had been done to me, but by my response to it. On a crisp Monday morning, 3 weeks after Brian moved out, Eleanor Thompson received unexpected visitors. Mark Wilson arrived at her suburban home with 2 members of his corporate investigation team and a court-approved search warrant. The company had pursued legal channels to investigate the misappropriation of their funds, giving Mark's team authority to examine financial records related to the beach house purchase. According to Mark's later report, Eleanor's reaction progressed from indignation to panic as they explained the purpose of their visit. "This is a private residence. You have no right," she protested, attempting to block their entry. When presented with the warrant, her face paled. "I need to call my attorney immediately." While the search was underway, Stephanie called Brian in a panic. "There are people from Amanda's company going through Mom's office. They're taking her computer and files." Brian immediately called me, his voice tight with anxiety. "What have you done, Amanda?" "There are corporate investigators at my mother's house." I explained calmly that the company was pursuing its own investigation into the misappropriation of company funds. "This isn't my doing, Brian. When $650,000 of company money is stolen, they have a legal obligation to investigate. Your mother brought this on herself." Mark called that evening with an update. "We found significant evidence at Eleanor's residence," he reported. "Financial documents, detailing the beach house purchase correspondence with the real estate agent and attorney, and most importantly, practice sheets, where she appears to have been perfecting your signature for the power of attorney." Document. His team had also discovered a handwritten timeline of the relocation bonus disbursement process. She had detailed notes about exactly when the funds would be deposited and how quickly she needed to act. This was clearly premeditated, not an impulsive decision. Brian's tone changed dramatically when he called again later that night. For the first time, his voice carried genuine remorse rather than defensiveness. "I had no idea Mom would go this far," he said quietly. "I knew she was upset about the move and worried about losing connection with me, but I never thought." He trailed off before adding, "Is there any way we can resolve this without criminal charges? She's 67, Amanda. She can't go to prison." The plea stirred complicated emotions, but my response remained firm. "This isn't about punishment, Brian. It's about accountability and recovering what was stolen. Your mother made a calculated decision to take something that wasn't hers. There are consequences for that choice." The investigation uncovered even more disturbing information about Eleanor's history. Mark's team discovered evidence that Eleanor had misappropriated funds from other family members previously. "We found correspondence regarding a loan she took from your father-in-law's life insurance payout that was meant for Brian's college fund," Mark explained during our next meeting. There are also records of money she borrowed from her brother, your husband's uncle, that was never repaid. The beach house appears to be part of a pattern of financial exploitation, disguised as family management. Most shocking was the discovery that Stephanie had been complicit in similar schemes before. Emails between mother and daughter revealed discussions about securing family assets from various relatives, including an elderly aunt whose retirement savings had been invested by Eleanor, but apparently used for Stephanie's graduate school tuition. Brian's name appeared in some of these exchanges, suggesting he had at least peripheral knowledge of his mother's financial manipulations. The image of the devoted son protecting his widowed mother dissolved, replaced by the reality of a family system built on deception and entitlement. The court ordered the beach house property frozen while legal proceedings continued. A judge issued an injunction preventing Stephanie from selling or renting the property, effectively locking her out of her ill-gotten gain. When photos of the house interior surfaced during discovery, they revealed high-end furnishings and renovations that appeared to have cost well beyond the remaining $45,000 from my relocation package. This raised questions about other potential sources of misappropriated funds, widening the scope of the investigation further. Stephanie's bravado crumbled when her own legal jeopardy became apparent. She called me directly, her voice lacking its usual condescension. "Amanda, I need to explain my side of this," she began. "Mom presented this whole thing as a family decision. She said Brian had agreed it was fair compensation for everything our family had done for you." When I remained silent, she continued desperately. "I just accepted the house. I didn't steal anything directly. Mom handled all the actual transactions." Her attempt to distance herself from responsibility concluded with an unexpected offer. "If you drop the claims against me specifically, I'll testify about everything Mom did. I have emails and texts proving she planned this for months." 2 months after Eleanor's theft, all parties gathered for settlement discussions. Eleanor, Brian, and Stephanie sat with their attorneys on one side of the conference room. I sat with Jennifer and the company's legal team on the other. The power dynamic had shifted dramatically from Eleanor's triumphant phone call. Now she avoided eye contact, her normally perfect appearance showing signs of strain. The company's attorney opened with a clear statement. "Our client was defrauded of $650,000 in company-provided relocation benefits. We have overwhelming evidence of forgery, fraud, and theft. We're prepared to pursue both civil penalties and criminal charges to the fullest extent of the law." After hours of negotiation, Eleanor finally conceded to full financial restitution. The beach house would be sold, with proceeds covering the stolen funds, plus interest and legal fees. Any remaining amount would go toward a significant civil penalty. Eleanor would provide a full written confession and submit to monitoring of her financial activities for 5 years. In exchange, the company would not pursue criminal charges, though the settlement agreement included a suspended prosecution provision. Any violation of the terms would immediately trigger criminal proceedings. As the legal matters resolved, Kate called me into her office with unexpected news. "Amanda, in light of everything that's happened, we've reevaluated the San Francisco transfer." My heart sank, assuming this meant the opportunity was lost. Instead, Kate continued, "We'd like to offer you a remote position with the same promotion and compensation package. You can work primarily from New York with quarterly trips to San Francisco." She slid a document across her desk. "Additionally, the company wants to offer this compensation for the distress and disruption you've experienced. We value your professionalism throughout this ordeal." The final surprising development came from Brian. He asked to meet at a neutral location, a park where we'd often spent Sunday afternoons early in our relationship. Sitting on a bench overlooking the pond, he looked diminished. Somehow the confident software engineer replaced by someone carrying visible guilt. "I've been seeing a therapist," he began awkwardly. "She's helping me understand the unhealthy dynamics with my mother and how I've enabled her behavior throughout my life." He paused, struggling with his next words. I failed you, Amanda. When you needed me most, I chose the familiar pattern of protecting my mother instead of standing by my wife. He asked if we might consider marriage counseling, promising to maintain boundaries with Eleanor and Stephanie. I'll cut them off completely if that's what it takes. I just want a chance to make things right. I listened to Brian's plea with a strange sense of detachment. The man before me had once been the center of my world, but that connection had been severed by his choices, not mine. I appreciate your apology, Brian, I said finally. I hope therapy helps you build healthier relationships in the future, but that future won't include me. His face crumpled, but I continued gently. Some betrayals can't be undone. You didn't just disagree with me or make a mistake. You abandoned me when I was victimized by your family. You chose them even when you knew they were wrong. As I stood to leave, I offered one final truth: I deserve someone who makes me their first priority, not their last. 1 year after Eleanor's fateful phone call, I stood in my new office overlooking the Manhattan skyline. The promotion I'd received included not just the remote work arrangement, but an advancement to Vice President of Financial Strategy. My apartment in a renovated brownstone near Central Park represented a fresh start, a space entirely my own, decorated to my taste without compromise. The woman who stared back from the mirror each morning looked similar to the Amanda of a year ago, but carried herself differently, more confidently, more peacefully, with boundaries firmly in place. The legal aftermath had concluded largely, as Jennifer predicted. Eleanor received 3 years of probation and a suspended sentence contingent on strict adherence to the financial settlement. The beach house sold for slightly less than the purchase price in a declining real estate market, but Eleanor was required to make up the difference from her personal savings. The psychological impact on her appeared significant. Mutual acquaintances reported she had become withdrawn from social circles where she once dominated, her reputation permanently damaged by the scandal. Stephanie faced professional consequences as well. When news of her involvement reached her employer, a public relations firm with strict ethics policies, she was terminated. Her attempts to rebrand herself on social media as a victim of circumstances failed when court documents became public record. Last I heard, she had moved to a smaller apartment in a less prestigious neighborhood, her dreams of beach house luxury replaced by the reality of rebuilding her life and career from a diminished position. Brian's career trajectory also suffered. Though not legally implicated, the association with a major fraud case raised questions about his judgment. The promising position in San Francisco was rescinded when background checks revealed the ongoing legal proceedings. He eventually found work at a smaller company, but at a significantly lower level than his previous role. He continued reaching out occasionally, with tentative texts that I eventually stopped answering. The divorce finalized 6 months after Eleanor's confession, with financial terms heavily favorable to me given the circumstances. The early days after Brian's departure were the darkest. I experienced sleepless nights, lost weight from lack of appetite, and struggled to concentrate at work. Simple tasks like grocery shopping or calling a friend required enormous effort. The betrayal replayed in my mind constantly, not just Eleanor's theft, but Brian's failure to stand by me when I needed him most. The foundation I had built my life upon had crumbled, leaving me questioning my judgment and worth. Recovery came gradually, beginning with small steps. Kate approved a flexible work schedule during the worst weeks, allowing me to rebuild my professional confidence. I started therapy, working through the complex grief of losing not just my husband but my belief in our shared reality. Weekends that once revolved around Brian's preferences became opportunities to rediscover interests I had set aside: photography classes, hiking groups, cooking techniques beyond Brian's limited palate. Each small choice made exclusively for myself represented another step toward healing. Rachel's friendship proved invaluable during this period. Unlike well-meaning acquaintances who offered platitudes about everything happening for a reason, Rachel provided practical support and unwavering loyalty. She organized weekend trips to nearby towns, introduced me to her extended social circle, and maintained a standing dinner date that ensured I had regular human connection during the loneliest period. Family isn't always blood, she reminded me over wine one evening. Sometimes it's the people who show up when everyone else walks away. The most important lesson emerged gradually understanding how to establish and maintain boundaries in all relationships. Through therapy and reflection, I recognized patterns in my marriage where I had compromised my own needs to keep peace with Brian and Eleanor. I had ignored red flags, dismissed my instincts, and allowed small boundary violations that eventually escalated to catastrophic betrayal. Healthy relationships don't require you to make yourself smaller, my therapist explained. They create space for both people to grow. This understanding transformed my approach to all relationships, personal and professional. I became more direct about my expectations and limits. I paid attention to how people responded to the word no, and distanced myself from those who didn't respect my boundaries. I practiced discerning between genuine connection and manipulation disguised as affection. Most importantly, I developed confidence in my own perceptions, instead of allowing others to define my reality. My perspective on forgiveness also evolved. Initially, I thought forgiveness meant excusing Eleanor's actions, or reconciling with Brian. Over time, I realized true forgiveness was an internal process unrelated to their participation or remorse. I forgive not because they deserve forgiveness, but because I deserve peace, became my mantra. This approach allowed me to release the consuming anger without denying the reality of what happened or exposing myself to further harm. Professionally, the experience paradoxically enhanced my career. Kate repeatedly commended my composure and ethical handling of the situation, eventually recommending me for a prestigious financial ethics speaking engagement. "You demonstrated extraordinary integrity under extreme pressure," she told me during my performance review. "That's exactly the quality we need in leadership positions." My reputation for calm crisis management and unwavering standards attracted attention from senior executives, opening doors previously beyond my reach. Occasionally, news about Eleanor, Brian, and Stephanie reached me through mutual connections. Eleanor lived in relative isolation, her social standing diminished by the scandal. Few former friends maintained contact after learning the details of her actions. Brian attempted to rebuild his life, but struggled with the consequences of his choices, both professional and personal. According to a former colleague who remained in touch with him, he often expressed regret about how he had handled the situation, acknowledging too late the true cost of enabling his mother's behavior. Stephanie experienced perhaps the most dramatic lifestyle change. The beach house dream evaporated, replaced by a modest apartment and entry-level position at a small marketing firm. Her social media presence, once filled with luxury vacations and designer purchases, grew quieter and more subdued. While I took no pleasure in their difficulties, I recognized the natural consequences of their actions, consequences that might ultimately lead to healthier choices and perspectives if they were willing to learn from them. The most profound lesson from this painful chapter was understanding that sometimes our greatest losses clear the path for our most meaningful gains. Losing Brian and the future we had planned created space for a life more authentically aligned with my values. The betrayal that once seemed like the end of everything became the catalyst for unprecedented growth and self-discovery. "We don't always get to choose what happens to us," I explained to a young colleague facing her own professional setback, "but we always get to choose how we respond and who we become as a result." Today, my life bears little resemblance to the one I shared with Brian. I've recently begun dating again cautiously, with clearer expectations and stronger boundaries. I'm finalizing plans to purchase a weekend cottage in the Berkshires, funded entirely by my own earnings and investment returns. My professional trajectory continues upward, with mentoring responsibilities added to my expanding role. The woman who once feared losing everything has discovered something essential when built on authentic values and healthy connections. Life becomes not just survivable after betrayal, but genuinely thriving. Have you ever experienced someone betraying your trust in a shocking way? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more tales of overcoming life's toughest challenges. Share this with someone who might need to be reminded of their own strength today. Thank you for listening to my journey from betrayal to rebuilding. Remember, sometimes the people who are meant to be in your corner are the ones who throw the hardest punches, but that doesn't mean you can't still win the fight.